Today we've got a very special video for you guys. It's something that I've been trying to do for the longest time now. I've recorded it a few times and just gone back and deleted it simply because I couldn't get it right, but this time I think I finally got it for you guys. Today we're going to be going over exactly what you need to be doing to dominate the lane phase in every single game. You see, this is my specialty. While I am able to play macro and micro at a pretty good level, the reason why I'm a challenger player is because I pretty much never lose lane. Now, this video is going to be from the perspective of top lane, but it applies to every single lane because the concepts are all the same. Now, make sure you don't miss out on our special Black Friday deal. Today is the last day that you can get your annual subscription for just $1.99 per month. Our website is the best learning tool out there for you if you want to be improving fast. Over on our website, we've got hundreds of guides, all done by challenger players, and we're constantly adding new guides and updating the old ones. Check us out using the link in the description below. So, how is it that I'm able to win lane in all of my games? I just want to say that there is a ton of groundwork. And this is all stuff that I've learned from playing at a challenger level for the past 6 or 7 years. That's right, it's not stuff that I learned right away even though I was playing at the highest level. It took me a ton of time to figure all of this out, but after mastering all of it, I pretty much never lose lane anymore. With this being said, let's take a quick peek at this groundwork. The most important thing is you need to understand a few very specific things about your matchup. First, you need to determine whether or not there are any counter mechanics that the enemy champion might have against you. This would be, for example, Jax's E blocking Renekton's W, or Malzahar ultimate stopping Katarina from getting resets, Gangplank Orange or Olaf ultimate removing Mordekaiser's ultimate. Stuff like this is very important to know going into the game because it gives you an opportunity to decide whether or not the team comps look good enough to the point where it's worth playing. If I'm playing Renekton into Jax, I know that I'm not going to lose that lane. But I also know that that lane isn't going to allow me to hard carry the game. If I take a look at the rest of my team comp and I decide that this isn't a good team comp and that they outdrafted us, this is when I dodge. Certain lanes are unwinnable, and while that doesn't mean that you're going to lose those lanes inherently, it does mean that it's going to stop you from carrying 1v9. It's not often that I do need to dodge, and most of the time I can play these horrible matchups out and actually win them just by following the rest of my rules. Just know that there are going to be some games that are going to be unwinnable from Champion Select, and those ones you need to dodge. Now, after analyzing the matchup in Champion Select and determining that this is a good enough matchup for me to go into the game and I don't need to dodge it, then I need to determine a few more things. At levels 1 through 3 at all times, I want to determine who has wave control, who wins the all-in, and who has shove advantage. The most important out of all of these is who has wave control. Whoever has wave control in the lane gets to determine what the minions are going to do. This could be a freeze, a slow push, a hard push, or even a neutral lane. Now you're probably wondering, how do I determine who has wave control? This is where the other two things come into play. In certain matchups, like, for example, Olaf into a melee who's really weak at level 1, Olaf is going to have wave advantage simply because he wins the 1v1 so hard at that point that the enemy champion can't even walk up. Certain other champions gain wave control, however, through their insane shove advantage. This would be something like Talon or Rumble. You're not allowed to contest these champions because they're going to kill your entire wave, and even if you're supposed to win the level 1 into them, you can't win the 1v1 into them and all of their minions when you don't have any. So, what are some solutions to these problems? Well, there are two different solutions because these are two different problems. If you're playing into a champion that beats you at shove advantage but you win the 1v1 at level 1, then one thing that you can do is cut them off before they get to the wave. My favorite way of doing this is going to Tribrush while the enemy is leashing their jungler red buff. Once they walk through Tribrush, I poke them with a quick trade, maybe an auto or two and an ability, and then I walk away. Remember, your goal here is to gain wave control on them, so you want to have as much of a health advantage as possible, but you also want to get to the wave before they can. Remember, you're going to have wave control right away because you got to the lane first and you have a health advantage. The only way for a champion with shove advantage to get control of the wave after this is to hit all of the minions at once with their ability. So all you have to do is position yourself aggressively in their minion wave and make it so they can't hit all of your minions at once. That's it. You don't even need to trade. What about in the other scenario where you don't win the 1v1? What do you do then? In this case, you just have to give level 1 away to the enemy champion. There's nothing you can do about it, and that's okay. Contesting something like Olaf, for example, at level 1 is just going to get you killed, and it's completely okay to just allow them to shove and get level 2 before you. What you need to be looking for in these cases is when the turning point of the lane occurs. At what point are you able to win the 1v1 against the enemy champion? Remember, if you're playing into something that you never win the 1v1 on, in these cases I dodge a lot of the time. So here we're looking for the turning point of the lane. It could be level 2, it could be level 3. Until then, you have to give wave control to the enemy champion, but as soon as you win the 1v1, you should be immediately fighting for wave control. The first thing you need to do is analyze what the wave is doing. If they're slow pushing it into you, and you can't win because they have too many minions, then start trimming the wave slowly. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 full waves before you can get wave control back from the enemy champion, and that's okay. You just need to be patient. Remember, at this point you win. It's okay to invest a little bit of time to make sure that you don't throw away this advantage that you're about to have. Okay, so we've covered the first 3 levels, which is very important. It can make or break a game, but there's still another 10 or so minutes left in the laning phase where you need to be focusing on other things. So what are we even looking at in this part of the game? Again, there are just a few key factors that you need to look at that will dictate what you want to do with the lane. Lane control, again, is going to be one of the most important things. This is something that you need to understand no matter what lane you play. Remember that the game is fundamentally about minions, and if you don't understand how minions behave and how to manipulate them, then you're putting yourself at a severe disadvantage. If at this point you don't understand what freezes, pushes, and neutral lanes are and how to perform them, then pause the video, go to our top lane macro or mid lane macro guide and watch those. There we cover exactly how to put each lane into effect and what they do. We'll leave a link for those in the description. Aside from wave control, past level 3, you need to determine who has all-in advantage, who has poke advantage, and who has sustain advantage. Now, if you're a player that plays bot lane, you might recognize these as the 3 different types of lanes. You have poke lanes, you have all-in lanes, and you have sustain lanes. Typically, poke lanes beat all-in lanes beat sustain lanes, and sustain lanes beat poke lanes. Now, we could go completely in depth on minion wave management and how to use minion wave management to break this cycle, but I've tried it in the past and the video always ends up being 30 to 40 minutes, which most of you guys just aren't interested in a video that long. So instead, I'm just going to give it to you guys super simple. You're just going to have to trust me on it. If you're playing an all-in lane, you want to freeze as much as possible, and if you're playing against an all-in lane, you also want to freeze. If you're playing a poke-based lane, you want to slow push as much as possible, and if you're playing against a poke lane, again, slow push as much as possible. If you're playing a sustain lane, neutral lanes are going to be your best friend. This is because you want as little minion interference as possible. You just want your base damages and your healing to carry the fight, and that's it. You don't have enough pressure to break a freeze if your slow push turns into a freeze, and if you're freezing yourself, then you're going to be too preoccupied clearing minions, you're never going to get any meaningful damage, so they're just going to crash it into your tower easily. If you're playing into a sustain lane, then you should either freeze or hard push. You don't want to slow push into a sustain-based lane because they're not going to have kill pressure on you, which means you don't really need the minion advantage. Once you've determined what type of lane that you're playing, this could be raw all-in, or poke with a little bit of sustain, or a little bit of everything, it doesn't really matter, then you can determine what type of wave you want to be looking for. This is what you're going to do to build a CS advantage on the enemy. Remember that just a CS advantage is considered winning the lane, but most people will get frustrated if you play the lane phase perfectly with perfect wave control for the entire game. They're going to make a misstep, resulting in a kill for you. So, what is the next thing that I'm looking for? That's right, there's even more. Like I said, I've been developing this for the past however many years. The next thing that you need to understand is power spikes, because this is when changes in the lane are going to happen next. Usually there's only going to be a few power spikes in the laning phase. This is going to be level power spikes like level 6 and level 9, and this is going to be item power spikes, usually your first and second item. Now, you might be wondering, well, how am I supposed to adapt to every single power spike? Wouldn't this take a lot of trial and error? And the answer to this is honestly no. As long as you understand the item or the ability, you don't need any prior experience in the lane. We're just going to be making the minions do all of the work here, and minions never change their behavior, ever. So how do we know how to play into a power spike, especially if we've never played against it before? Well, it's very simple. All you have to do is determine what this power spike is going to do in terms of their all-in potential, their poke potential, and their sustain potential. If it changes their playstyle from one to another, all you have to do is adapt how you are playing to fit their new playstyle, and that's it. You should also be adapting to power spikes of your own. A really good example is Kennen, for the first few minutes of the game, is going to be a very poke-heavy champion. He's not going to be very good at all-inning. Once he gets level 6 and an item or two though, he changes from a poke-based champion to an all-in based champion. This means you need to adapt your playstyle from playing against a poke-based champion in the first few minutes into the game to playing into a all-in based champion once he hits his power spikes. This is one of the hardest concepts in the game for lower elo players to grasp. Remember, the game is not static, it's constantly changing as you're playing through it, and you need to treat it as though it is. This means that you should also be adapting your play for your own power spike, and this is one that is a lot easier to do. Typically, you're going to know your champion better than the enemy knows your champion, so you're going to know how your power spikes affect you better than they do. They most likely also won't be playing around your power spikes and will only be playing around theirs. This means that you can change the way you play when you power spike very suddenly, and they won't be able to react to it very quickly, meaning you can probably get a kill off of it. For example, if you've just been slow pushing all game long looking for tower plating, and then suddenly you get your first item and you have some really good all-in potential, and you start a freeze, then you're going to be able to look for an all-in because they're not going to be used to how far away from you they need to play. Now, moving on to the final thing that you need to understand, and this one is really important. It's split into two different things: scale advantage and stall advantage. Scale advantage is the simpler of the two. Whichever champion scales better into the game has scale advantage. Scale advantage really starts to kick in once the lane has ended, but it can kick in a little bit sooner. Whichever champion has more power later on into the game has scale advantage. The counterpart to scale advantage is stall advantage. Stall advantage is what allows you to get to that guaranteed late game that scale advantage gives you. Now this could be through more conventional means like wave clear for example, but it can also be through playmaking ability. An example of this would be a champion that's really good at stealing Baron, like Evelynn or Nunu or Lee Sin. This isn't super applicable to the lane phase, but you do need to take it into account because it tells you how much pressure you need to be exerting in the lane phase. If you have stall advantage and scale advantage, then it's okay to walk away from the lane completely even in CS. That means you've won the lane. If you don't have scale advantage, then first of all, your stall advantage doesn't really mean anything. If you don't outscale, then stalling the game won't do anything. But you also need to win the lane very hard in order for it to be a truly winning lane phase. If you're playing something like Pantheon into Jax, you need to be walking away from lane 20 CS up and a kill or two in order for it to be truly considered winning the lane. If you don't, this means that Jax is just going to outscale you, and then you really didn't end up winning your lane. Scale advantage is something that people typically don't take into account, which is absurd to me because it is so important. People will see themselves up 10 or 20 CS on Pantheon and they'll say, yeah, well I won the lane. Well no, you didn't. 10 to 20 CS does not constitute a win in the lane if you are outscaled by such an insane metric that you can't even 1v1 the enemy champion by the time you leave the lane phase. You can also win the lane by being 10 to 20 CS down simply because you outscale so hard. Now keep in mind, this is only for cases where it's close in CS. 40 or 50 CS does not mean that it's close. That is just about everything that I have to help you guys learn how to win every single lane phase. This video was absolutely packed to the brim with information, so go back and watch it again if you need to, because all of it is important. I could have definitely gone a lot more in depth on this, but we just didn't have the time. The video would have been way too long. Now, a lot of this stuff is going to be really hard to implement. It's going to take a lot of work, but if you work on it slowly throughout the entirety of the preseason, then you should have it down by the time the next season starts. Remember that the preseason is the best time for learning and improvement. If you want a learning tool to help you improve, then our website, GameLeap.com, is perfect for you. Right now, we are doing our special Black Friday deal where you can get your annual membership for just $1.99 per month. On our website, we've got hundreds of guides, all done by Challenger players, sorted into a quick and easy to use courses system. We've got courses both on the 5 fundamental roles, as well as champion specific courses. So if that is something that interests you, then make sure to check us out using the link in the description below. As always, I'm Panther, I hope you learned something valuable, and I will see you in the next one.